haven't had a single response. one. Okay, Georgi Dinkov, how are you, sir?
Still afloat.
There was a little
still making Big Pharma angry.
yeah. You're the primary person doing that. So I'll start off where I always start off. What's new in DC? Well, how are things going there?
A lot of helicopters in the sky. DC has always had their presence, especially like during last summer, because of the peaceful protests. There was at least one police helicopter always in the skies. But now there's something going on. We have multiple ones, both military and regular police in the skies, and they keep saying it's preparing for some kind of a social unrest. So it's a training exercise. So, but basically, it feels like you live in a, I don't know, like a war zone. The military, the National Guard, I don't see them no more. The White House, like there were 3 layers of fencing. The 2 outer ones are gone. So the only fencing that remains is like right next to the White House. It's basically like the White House has its own fence, right, which was part of the White House compound. But then they added 3 additional ones as protection. And like the outermost one was really this fortified one that kind of like stayed there until like maybe March, April timeframe, while they were afraid there's going to be a riot or what is it called, insurrection. That one got removed. Then the second one got removed, I think in May. And now the only one that remains is like, it's not really a fence. It kind of looks like a chicken coop fence. And it's that and the White House fence. So, but I haven't seen the motorcade with the president or the vice president ever since Biden, took power. When Trump was in power, or like even before him, like Obama, and even before that, Bush and Cheney, I mean, they were whizzing around in their motorcades all the time. Right now, I don't see any of them. I mean, like I haven't seen a single heavily fortified motorcade, which is either the president or the vice president. I haven't seen any of those since Biden took power. And then I think there's still fence around Capitol Hill and maybe like the Library of Congress. But that's pretty much it. Pretty much everything is kind of like, it's not back to normal, but it's back to what people are considering normal. You can go into a bar without a mask and sit at the bar. But now they're trying to make it really hard to do these social activities if you're unvaccinated. There's no talk of a vaccine passport yet, but Bowser is kind of on board with New York City, kind of following what New York City did with their vaccine passport and saying she's already started. She gave money to some kind of private company to start implementing something similar. So that's probably coming too. But aside from that, it's kind of like a weird, quiet. People are out and about drinking. Doing what they used to do. But you can sense tension in the air. There's always this discussion about vaccines and how like the dummies refuse to vaccinate and like threatening the lives of all these poor people and whatnot. So if you're unvaccinated in DC, you better keep it to yourself.
On Twitter, there's like a hashtag in Mexico, and it's like covidiotas, yeah, but it's like covidiotas, I think. But man, yeah, I can't even imagine being around normal people. My interface with people is pretty select, and only people that really have a clue of what's going on. And so that seems like an extra layer of stress. However, I did catch up with a few friends, and it was stressful to even communicate with them.
There is no normal people. I don't know what you mean by normal people. These are long gone.
Yeah.
I mean, when I go to the bar, I don't talk to anybody. I just read my phone. I read some studies, and like sometimes people try to engage you, but there's something in the way they behave, and it was very different. It is very different right now than from before the pandemic. Everybody's kind of like agitated about something. They can't really put your finger on it, but they're angry about something. And the conversation always steers. They're always trying to gauge you. Like, are you not so much in DC because it's 93% Democrat, but still, like it's like when they catch an accent, they're already on their guard and like, okay, oh, whoa. So what do you think of our president? And unless you're saying like, whatever, Black Lives Matter. I mean, like you may get in trouble.
I'm sorry to break the flow of this. Are you hearing any popping on your end of the microphone? I'm hearing it a little bit. It's kind of wigging me out. Okay, hopefully it's only me, but I sincerely doubt it. So
I'm hearing the Mexican Federalists.
Yeah, well, that is
the shotguns in the background.
That is happening. This is like a technical. I've never heard this before. Anyways. So the big news, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, but so this next cyber attack after the pipeline, we're way late on this because we haven't had a show in between then, but how funny is it that the JBS is partners with the World Economic Forum? Pretty
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, coincidence.
Well, and also quite in line with what Whitney Webb has been writing, and and like the globalresearch.ca website. If you go there, they have a couple articles on that too. I don't know. I guess, I mean, I don't blame the regular folks, because in order to connect the dots, you have to be reading these sites that are considered crazy, right? Really on the fringe, really out there. But if you read them, then it's like, it's hard not to start getting really concerned, because they write something. They don't have to get all the details right, but the general picture that I'm getting from these websites, it's pretty spot on. I've been reading Zero Hedge lately, and they mostly talk about economics and business. I mean, they started worrying about inflation back in like May 2020, right? And now they're all talking about like how inflation is here. It's definitely not temporary. Basically, it's in the double digits if you use the original formula of the CPI index, which Congress never explained why they changed. So it will be a crazy year. I'm kind of concerned that they may like hurry up and start bombing some country, because situation doesn't look good economically. So, and now the Fed is saying that they're thinking about stopping the stimulus, and even that they're thinking spooked the markets, and they dropped like 7% like 2 weeks ago or something like that. Something crazy. So that this recovery is really just another bubble based on free money, on printing the money printing press. It's not going to last. Also, China and Russia are both dumping dollars. They're trying to buy more gold. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit more optimistic, because now we're at least allowed to get out of the houses, but I don't know for how long. The way things are going now with the India and like the new COVID variants coming out. I wouldn't be surprised if we have another lockdown, at least in DC, this coming fall. Bowser is already saying that she's thinking about it, and she's closely watching the numbers. Did you see the UK extended the lockdown by another 4 weeks because they had 8,000 cases in a country of 80 million? They had 8,000 new cases of COVID. I'm like, there's probably 8,000 people that die out of lightning strike. Like the UK in a single day die.
Slip in a bathtub.
Not infected, die.
I talked to somebody in Melbourne today, and I forgot what the length was, but they just had like a new lockdown starting a few days ago or today or something. And
Melbourne, where, Michigan?
No, Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, Melbourne. Okay.
Yeah. And maybe I don't know if we talked about this before, but there was a hypothesis that those places were being slammed so hard, Canada, parts of Europe, and then Australia, because they were part of the Commonwealth. And so they're probably just way easier to control and exert oligarchs' will on those areas.
That's true. Yeah. The hardest lockdowns were in the Commonwealth countries, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, right? Yeah. So that makes sense. And India too, even India is not part of the Commonwealth. Jamaica as well. So like former parts of the British Empire seem to be like they're really former only on paper. I guess they're still controlled very much by the empire. And they play along. So whatever the Queen says, they implement.
And then Cyber Polygon is this July 9th, I think. And so there was an article on Zero Hedge. And nobody can predict these things, but one of the authors was like, everybody should be vigilant a few months after Cyber Polygon, because it's always like a few months after the strategic planning that the thing happens. Right. And so,
like the Boston Bombers, they had an event exactly like that.
Oh yeah, like
with what we call them, like with bombs made with household materials. They actually had they had a training. What do they call it? Like it's not a training session, but it's like basically a dry run. They had it on the same day, right? How crazy is that? Like, I mean, even if you believe in coincidences, this is absurd. Like the FBI and Boston Police Department and I think the Department of Homeland Security are training that Muslim terrorists are going to basically explode homemade bombs during the Boston Marathon, and then like 24 or 48 hours later, that's exactly what happens.
I forgot the number, but there was some ridiculous number of war games on 9/11. I think there's like an earthquake going on right now. Like the whole place is shaking. Really? Yeah. Okay. I think we're good. Anyways, I seriously want to say there was something like, I hope I'm not totally off here. I think there's like 50 something or other war games during 9/11. And that was part of why these agencies were so confused, because there's recordings during 9/11, and they're like, wait, is this a drill or is this real? And there, you can tell there's like complete and total utter confusion on the day of 9/11 about what's happening.
I mean, you don't have to like predict the exact event, but there are only that many tools that they have, right? It's either a war, right? A terrorist attack, a cyber attack, or a pandemic. There isn't much else that they can do. Oh, there's the UFOs, but so far the UFOs haven't started shooting, so they're not exactly. I mean, they've been trying to switch the public's attention towards the UFO sightings, but now guess what? Guess what the latest is? Some senator came out and said, "I bet you this is like a new weapon developed by Russia and China," and I think somebody slapped him and said, "Shh, that's not." You're ruining the story. These are real UFOs. People need to, because they're kind of tired of the Russia-China narrative, right? Yeah. I think people can only be captivated if the story goes like, oh wow, this is like true alien life. That's the only way you can switch the public's attention to something else. So he like then they interviewed that senator. He recanted his words. He's like, I meant in general that if you see something abnormal in the sky, your first thought should be that it's Russia and or China. And then only then you should be thinking about UFOs. But anyways.
Just because we were talking about UFOs, I can't remember if we talked about it on this podcast or not, but remember before Trump got elected, what's that weirdo creep's name? John Podesta would go on like late night shows. Yeah, but him, Bill Clinton, Obama, and Hillary would talk about UFOs fairly regularly. And then when Trump got elected, that whole narrative kind of dropped. And now it's been resurfaced. And so it's like almost when they thought they were going to win that election, whatever happened, they were like seeding that like way before, like pre-2016. And then, and even in those WikiLeaks emails, like John Podesta was talking about free energy and UFOs and stuff. So it will be exciting to see how that narrative unwinds itself.
I just don't think it will unwind much. I mean, that's why they're probably blaming on China and Russia, because it didn't stick.
Great stuff. Okay, so anything else before we dive into articles? Anything you think is important or we haven't chatted about?
Not really.
So you were on the Strong Sisters YouTube channel. People should go check that out. I'm talking to them tomorrow, and that's all.
Yeah, if they don't get lynched by their former pals from the paleo community, then the paleo people will probably show up at my door. But thank God, actually, I dropped paleo right before it actually started becoming popular. I was one of the very, very early adopters because I got this idea from the actual studies. So I don't think I have any paleo enemies right now. Well, if I do, they're indirect. They're just because they heard of me saying something. That's why they have animosity. But I never, like, my former paleo friends have long forgotten about me, at least the ones in the DC area.
Yeah, their audience holds a serious aggression towards them for even talking to somebody like yourself. So that's interesting. It's weird to me because like we have such no bullshit. We have such an amazing audience. Like I think we've really developed something really good here. And so it's crazy to go over to like the comments section of people saying that these ideas are totally insane and crazy, but that's the low carb paradigm. Like none of this stuff fits in that paradigm at all. And the biggest mistake is taking your low carb view and then trying to plug these things into it because it's not going to make any sense.
All I have to say is, if you believe in low carb, stick to it. After 12 months, come and talk to me, and let's see how you feel. You'll probably be insulin resistant by then, and it will not be a pleasant journey back. That's all I have to say. I've never seen a person who is a former paleo who had it easy going back to a regular diet. Even if you don't do the high carb, which is what I guess like Pete would be considered. Like even if you try to go back to a regular diet, if you oxidize mostly fat, especially if you got to the level of ketosis, if you stayed in ketosis for a month or more, you'll be in a world of hurt. I mean, there's definitely going to be some insulin resistance there, and then you'll probably pile on some pounds as soon as you try to go back to a normal diet. You'll feel better, but you weigh a lot more. So then, like, the horrible choice would be: do I continue with the paleo torture for life, knowing that I'm truly ruining my health and this cannot be stopped, or do I go back to normal life and I have to figure out how to lose that extra weight?
Well, unfortunately, Georgi, we're just going to have to do what our ancestors did, and they unfortunately did not eat carbohydrate in any capacity, or it was very limited during summertime. So, unfortunately, I hear what you're saying, but I just have to reject
what about the
it.
Simani?
Reject
what about
it
the
outright.
Simani Indians?
I've never heard of them, unfortunately. So
never.
I don't know.
Okay. Perhaps you should get on more. That's all I have to say.
Okay, everybody, give this episode a like. It really supports the show. So if you do want to support in some way, that is a great way to do it. Subscribe on t.me/Dana Rowdy. I try to keep everybody very updated there of all things going on. And so check that out. Follow me on Instagram. I have food things there. Georgi on twitter.com/Hidut. And then idealabsdc.com, which we'll talk about in a little bit after we go through some articles. Okay, so which of these did you seriously
take a pick?
Yeah,
Yo, pretty. I mean, I got hate mail for every single one of them. So I guess like you ruffle lots of feathers.
I think the maternal high-PUFA one was the one. I scrolled through your Twitter, and that was the one that seemed to have the most likes.
Yeah, Twitter. People tend to behave on Twitter. It's like it's the people who want to really like give it to me the way like to tell me how they really feel about it. They usually email me or send me a PM through the Rapid forum.
Yeah, no.
Despite me, I don't know. I disabled my PM functionality there, but they're using like old conversations that we've had, and they can actually continue it, right? Unless I actually block the conversation as well. So they're like, I have things that are like people that they've sent me a message 7 years ago, and suddenly like this whole thread is getting renewed. It's like, well, that thing you wrote in your blog, like we really need to talk about it.
They're still on you for saying that rice inhibits 5-alpha reductase. That was like, oh. Do you remember that? I got endless hate mail about that.
Well, but the thing is, it goes perfectly well with what we know about the Asian populations, right?
I know, I'm totally.
They're known to have lower DHT levels.
Okay, so let's get into this maternal one. What were the critical features of this article?
The one that I particularly like is that one of the few articles that establishes directly the connection between PUFA and estrogen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So basically, it puts you in a hyper-estrogenic state by upregulating the amount of both the estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta production inside of the cells.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they actually, if you read through what the studies, the authors themselves think, they say that the effects that they're seeing, like aggressiveness, alcoholism, and basically like declining health, it's due to the increased estrogen that PUFA actually created. So there you go. And it starts right there. We increased estradiol levels in pregnant rats by feeding them a diet containing high levels of omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. If that is true, that alone should give a huge pause to anybody who defends unsaturated fats. Right there. I mean, like, even among mainstream medicine, like even hardcore hormonal HRT therapy for women, they're still walking carefully on thin ice because the WHI, the Women's Health Initiative study results, are still valid. And now they're trying to go around it by saying, well, the dosage of the estrogen was too high, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't say it publicly. I mean, basically, like there's still these. If you go to a regular endocrinologist, he or she will probably say, I don't think it's wise to start an HRT with estrogen. Let's try something else first, right?
Or they'll dump on estradiol, but they'll say estrone and estriol are like the protective ones.
They're saying, oh, they're weaker. So actually, if we increase your metabolism of the estradiol back to estrone or going to estriol, everything will be fine. No, it won't. They're all capable of activating the estrogen receptor. In fact, it's the levels of estrone that are most highly correlated with both breast cancer and prostate cancer. And estrone sulfate is the most reliable predictor of mortality from prostate cancer. So I don't think there's such thing as a benign estrogen. There was another study I posted on a blog about 2 weeks ago, which said even non-carcinogenic estrogens are carcinogenic.
Yeah.
What? So, yeah.
I was going to say, so the PUFA are estrogenic even if they do not break down into prostaglandins, right?
Precisely, yeah. And this has already been confirmed. And it was a very old study from the 50s, I think, that I posted both on the forum and the blog, which basically showed that estrogenicity and unsaturation always go hand in hand. Whenever you're consuming a lipid molecule with more than one double bond, you basically like essentially consuming something that either acts like estrogen or potentiate estrogen's effects, or it can fill in for estrogen if estrogen is not there, or it can increase like the toxicity of things that synergize with estrogen, pretty much estrogen itself, right? And keep in mind that you're consuming them in much higher amounts. Yes, they may be weaker than estrogen in terms of their effects, but if they can potentiate the ability of estrogen to exert its effects, then basically you don't want to mess with those things in the diet because nobody can have low enough estrogen. Most people have too much.
Yeah, let's just comment on that for a second. So that that occasionally is a thing. It's like, well, I don't want to drive my estrogen too low, but in today's environment, that is extraordinarily unlikely, if not impossible, unless you're taking some pharma drug to totally eliminate estrogen.
And it still wouldn't be eliminated 100%. Basically, they breed these mice and rats that are aromatase deficient. They lack completely that enzyme, right? And basically, these rats, the only negative effect that it has is like they don't undergo puberty, and their gonadal organs don't work so well. But they still produce testosterone. The females still produce progesterone. They actually live much longer than the rats with aromatase. They just can't reproduce very well, right? Because they never go into estrus. They never go into heat. That's really the only downside to having absolutely no aromatase in an organism. I don't know that there are any humans that genetically lack aromatase, but it will be interesting to see what happens to them. Bottom line is, even those animals that have zero estrogen in their bodies are perfectly healthy, aside from the lack of reproduction. But when you eat the PUFA, you're getting early puberty. So even if you don't believe into the dangers of estrogen, early puberty at this point is universally accepted, even in mainstream medicine, is a very reliable predictive factor of pretty much any chronic disease you can imagine, as well as premature mortality.
And moreover, go ahead.
That's what the PUFA did, basically triggered early puberty. And of course, the aggressiveness. I'm sure you know the mantra, like bodybuilders they call it roid rage, right? Because they're getting all these androgenic steroids, and men that are high on androgens, they're really aggressive. They chase people around. They want to take their money. They want to rape people, right? No, it's actually estrogen that does that. And believe it or not, there's studies going back to the 1930s that demonstrated that non-aromatizable androgens do not increase aggression. And this thing confirms it here. So if a bodybuilder is taking steroids and it's not the androgenic effect that's causing the aggression, what remains? Either cortisol, because some of them are pro-cortisol, right? Either prolactin or estrogen. I mean, there's not much else that remains.
Yeah, that is explains it way more. So this is estrogenic encounters, how interactions between aromatase, etc. So studies conducted in a wide variety of species indicate that estrogens modulate aggression. Aromatization, testosterone to estrogen within the brain may mask relationships between androgens and aggressive behavior. I think you probably posted this a long time ago.
And this study probably has the references to the really old studies. I'm telling you, this goes back to 1930, and it seems to have been common knowledge until about the 1970s, and I think that's when HRT, hormone replacement therapy for women with estradiol, really peaked, and they were saying like, well, we better forget about that whole story because it's going to hurt sales.
Okay, great stuff. What was the last thing I was going to say is, like, even if you thought the mechanism we were talking about was wrong, like the PUFA are substrate for lipid peroxidation, and then lipid peroxidation destroys vitamin A, and you cannot produce the steroids when you're constantly destroying the vitamin A to make them, right?
And also prostaglandins directly inhibit the Leydig cells in the gonads, and also the ovarian cells that produce progesterone. In fact, NSAID drugs, non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, even the ones that are not particularly good for you, such as ibuprofen or naproxen, but especially aspirin, they have an anabolic effect in older humans. This has already been confirmed. So one of the first studies that caught my eye when I was reading that old blog Ergolog back in 2011 or even earlier, it said that ibuprofen had anabolic effects for old people, and the doctor said, well, we don't know why. Well, I'll tell you why. But when you inhibit the prostaglandins, which are really, really at a high level in older people, because they have so much PUFA and almost none of the anti-inflammatory substances that protect from the synthesis of prostaglandins, basically their gonads are blocked partially because of that. So even if you only inhibit the prostaglandin synthesis, you're freeing up about 40% of the capacity for the gonads to produce these anabolic hormones again. So the old grandpas and grandmas are basically becoming muscle bound if they take like one pill of an NSAID drug per day. I'm serious. All these are human studies.
I believe you. Okay, what was I gonna say? This popping is killing me. It's so bad on my end. I don't know what's wrong. I'll have to
I don't hear any popping, man.
I know that it's great to hear. It's like I said in the chat, I have PTSD from like doing these and then hearing them after and hearing popping. So obviously ride along with it here. I just yeah. Okay, so and we don't have to go all night. We have we'll meet again next week, and so if you want to save some of these for next week, I think that would be excellent. And then the week after, I haven't even emailed him yet, but we'll have Ray on the show again, which is always a
Yeah,
pleasure.
I'll probably have more. I mean, like, so even if we go through like half of these, I'll have more by next week.
Perfect. Do you
So
want?
the second one is pretty good. The stress ups cortisol, estrogen, prolactin, drops DHE, causes man fertility, and
Perfect.
prostate issues. That's the key here, because of course, if you talk to any doctor, they'll tell you DHT is bad for the prostate. You have high DHT, you're guaranteed you have prostate issues. Well, this study found the exact opposite. That basically prolonged stress in the form of inability to use one or more limbs, because the study was with rats, basically increased all of the stress hormones, which is expected, right? But it also decreased dihydrotestosterone, caused infertility as a result of the hyper-estrogenemia, and low, like hypoandrogenemia. But at the same time, caused drastic increase in the prostate size, and it also caused actually structural pathological changes in the prostate itself. So really, you cannot reconcile these results with the current dogma, even if you believed in it, that androgens are somehow like bad for the prostate. Whatever bad side effects are being seen from androgens on the prostate are probably just like for the aggression. They're coming from the usage of aromatizable androgens, and then androgens get blamed when in reality it's the aromatization that's really, basically like changing the, like causing the morphological, metabolic, and other pathological changes in the prostate.
And then why would estrogen promote prostate growth? Like what does it do to a cell versus what an androgen would do?
Well, I mean, all androgens are differentiating hormones. Estrogen is an anti-differentiating one. And estrogen and prolactin, I know you just showed something on Twitter, said prolactin enhances liver regeneration. Scroll down a little bit.
Did I have that?
There you go. Sarah Madden.
Okay.
That is true. In fact, but here's the thing. Just like everything else, like the stress hormones initially in the short term are beneficial. If you have liver injury, prolactin, estrogen will increase because that's what stimulates the healing, the generation of new tissue. But the whole point here is that after a while, basically, if this continues, right, these things get out of hand. And if the differentiating factors decrease, right, then there's nothing to oppose estrogen and prolactin, and they actually form a vicious circle. Estrogen acts on the pituitary to increase prolactin release. Prolactin itself stimulates aromatase, and on it goes until you have something that breaks that cycle. And usually the endogenous factors in the body that do that are either the androgens, either thyroid hormone, or pregnenolone and progesterone. So if these are being decimated, because if your androgens drop under stress, it's hard to believe that pregnenolone and progesterone somehow remained elevated, right? So basically, you're getting all of the cortisol hormones, all of the stress hormones are rising. The protective ones are dropping, right? You're seeing degenerative changes in the gonads and the prostate. Well, if there's nothing to stop that cycle, it will not stop. It will continue. So not that estrogen and prolactin by themselves are bad in every circumstance, right? But if you continue this for a while, which is what the study is, it's a chronic stress. If you get a immobilized limb for a day, you're probably going to live, right? It's nothing bad's going to happen long term. But if continue, if chronically you cannot use one or more limbs, just think about the way this will impact your life. And basically you'll be under a state of chronic stress, and it's hard to argue that this person will be in a good health, to the point that even mainstream medicine, if you have some kind of an accident, God forbid, you lose an arm or a leg or you get paralyzed, they will immediately assign you to a psychiatrist because they know that this is going to cause some major psychological, psychiatric issues. And what causes those? Serotonin in most cases, and cortisol, right? So if those things are high, and now you're in a state of learned helplessness, there's nothing opposing the pro-growth, anti-differentiating factors, and eventually a tumor is going to start forming somewhere.
So in a sense, like aging is a steady, slow, usually a slow state of de-differentiation. Is that right?
Yeah, and basically, like eventually you get to a point where the desperate attempt to repair an organ gets out of hand, because this repair is always ongoing, right? These growth factors are always there, but it's what prevents them from really taking over and killing you is the presence of differentiating factors. I remember a study I read recently saying that men produce about 45 micrograms of estrogen daily, and they're saying the only reason men are not walking around with massive boobs and basically going into heat and behaving homosexually is that basically if there's a sufficient amount of androgens being produced in the body. And there's this thing called testicular feminization. Chronic alcoholism causes feminization as well. So basically you can have a male very quickly turn into the phenotype of a female if the estrogens that the male produces on a daily basis without any excess, right, are if they go unopposed. In other words, that's what actually finasteride does to a certain degree. By blocking the most potent anti-estrogenic signal in the male body, which happens to be dihydrotestosterone, basically you're shifting the organism a little bit towards the female side. And there are studies that I think I keep saying, like, I'm going to post that study about the serial killers and the kids and whatnot.
I think
but
we
it's got
talked
a
about
paragraph
that
in there,
like 4 years ago.
I never find the time to do it. It's just not enough time. But anyways, there's a paragraph there which argues convincingly and gives the reference to a few studies that show that providing finasteride to animals basically removes the sexual preference of males for females. They immediately start, basically liking both sexes, actually the males a little bit more, and they behave passively. They allow themselves to be mounted. So they act like females, even though biologically they're still probably more male than the females. So yeah, so just like the estrogen, it's if there's nothing there to oppose it, it's always there. That's what its role is, to keep growth happening. But if there's nothing there to channel that growth, eventually we'll revert back to the amoeba/bacterial colony that we were 2 billion years ago.
And I was looking for it. Remember, Ray is always talking about that monkey experiment where they take out the female monkey's ovaries and then it starts producing a massive amount of estrogen in its arm. Yeah. And I remember getting a hold of that. So it's like there's not really a limit on the amount of estrogen and
every cell expresses the aromatase enzyme. Every cell. Whereas
you have to have a lot of things specifically in place. Your environment has to be good to be able to produce thyroid hormone and the corresponding youth-associated steroids. Yeah.
So what we are is fully enabled only by those differentiating hormones. Remove those, and we're no different than bacteria.
Great stuff. Okay, chat. Thank you very much. Guys are always great. Give this episode a like, guys. Let me do just a small advertisement here. Okay, so follow me on Instagram. Follow Georgi on twitter.com/Hidut. And I didn't even put it on here. I do coaching on patreon.com/Danny Roddy. I don't know what the status is. Oh, okay, there's a spot here.
And that's still on Patreon. I thought you ditched it.
No,
only for coaching.
Beggars can't be choosers. I can't just bail on a platform. I do not like Patreon. I think their business practices reprehensible, but at the moment it's just not.
They're useful, right?
Yeah, not feasible to move. So, anyways, this is $100 for 2 60-minute calls and email and things like that. Okay, so now let's talk about Idealabs. What's new in Idealabs land?
Synthesizing some serotonin antagonists with the group in Bulgaria. The fatty acid oxidation inhibitor is now being tested for cancer. There are at least, I think, 3 studies that are ongoing. And then if that works, then we're also going to try to synthesize a phytoandrogen known as drupanol.
Okay.
Drupanol.
Can you spell it one more time?
N-O-L. It's one U.
Oh, okay.
But it'll correct you.
Yeah.
It didn't.
Drupanol.
Drupanol. O-L.
Okay. This is great content. Okay. Drupanol.
Yes. There you go.
Got it. Okay. I didn't even know this exists. This is a phytotestosterone. Androgen. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And the studies were conducted in the former Soviet Union back in the 70s. And there's not rumor, it's kind of be confirmed because I spoke to several athletes that are now retired that used to compete in the former Soviet Union. They're saying there was basically their equivalent of Tribulus terrestris, but the Russian doctors had more faith in this than they did in tribulus because they actually managed to isolate this molecule and test it in its pure form. While with tribulus, you never know what you're getting because it's basically an extract. There's 1,000 of chemicals in there. They think it's protodiosine that's the active ingredient, but nobody really knows for sure. And in fact, it's known that in the tribulus, because it's extract from a plant, you are getting some of the estrogenic ones. For example, the water extract of Tribulus terrestris is estrogenic, but the ethanol one, which tends to extract the more lipophilic molecules, was heavily androgenic. So anyways, the Russians extracted this, isolated this. It's naturally present in an herb that grows in Central Asia and in Russia. And basically we're going to try to synthesize it. And do some studies with it, because if it works, hopefully this will be a new product. We'll see how it goes. Probably in combination with eugenol, which is another similarly structured molecule. Eugenol is very interesting because recent study found that it works almost identically to the anti-aging pro-dopamine drug known as selegiline. You may have heard Ray mention a few times.
A little bit familiar.
Yeah, it's a monoamine oxidase type B inhibitor. And it's really basically it's one of the few drugs that the elite and the Hollywood elite abuses left and right. It's basically its main effect is increasing dopamine by suppressing monoamine oxidase type B. But it seems to also have an anti-estrogenic effect and also anabolic effect for the brain, selegiline. And a recent study found that eugenol works in pretty much exactly the same way. And you compare actually the two. So you need slightly higher dosage for eugenol, but the effect should be largely the same. And I think Ray mentioned eugenol to a few people when they asked him, is there like a natural anti-inflammatory different from aspirin, because they couldn't tolerate aspirin no matter what they tried. And he mentioned eugenol. So we may be able to do a new product of drupanol and eugenol to be an anti-estrogenic, pro-dopamine, and pro-androgen, and see how it goes.
When that goes into the body, does it increase the endogenous testosterone, or
no? I think it's an androgen agonist. Basically, it's capable. If you look at the structure, you have a phenolic ring and a hydroxyl group, basically to the right of the picture, and that's usually enough to bind to the estrogen receptor. Eugenol, which is similar in structure, has been found to bind to the estrogen receptor and act as an antagonist. So usually, anything that acts as an estrogen antagonist will have androgenic effect, simply because you are allowing androgens. Basically, you have more androgens to be used for other things than battle estrogen, right? If the estrogen receptors are blocked and the body feels like basically the estrogens are not there, you're going to inhibit the brake which estrogen establishes on the synthesis of gonadal hormones. That's why aromatase inhibitors work. By inhibiting estrogen, they allow the gonads to produce more androgens. It's estrogen really that's controlling the pituitary, inhibiting the LH and FSH, and also directly acting on the Leydig cells. So if you get bodybuilders prefer tamoxifen, raloxifene, clomid, right? All of these things, but they're all synthetic estrogens. You can do the exact same thing with eugenol. I mean, multiple studies have shown that it works pretty much exactly the same way as these drugs, except it's a pure anti-estrogen without the selective estrogenic effects that these molecules have. I suspect drupanol works similarly. There isn't much published on it. The two studies that are in Russian, they basically show that it has an anabolic and androgenic effect. And because the animals were castrated, this usually suggests that it's the chemical itself that has these effects, instead of simply promoting the synthesis of androgens by the organism's gonads. Because if the animal is castrated, the gonads are gone. So there isn't much. Of course, you have the adrenals, but as far as I could see, the studies took a look at the adrenal hormones. They didn't change. So if this thing managed to have an anabolic and an androgenic effect, and the animals were castrated, then it's got to be an organic effect, not a peripheral one, to increasing endogenous synthesis. Amazing. I have great news. I fixed the popping. So I'm very, very happy right now. Okay. That was very annoying. Okay. So let's run through. We're at like about 45 minutes. Sincerely appreciate it, everybody, hanging out with us on your Friday evening. It's very heartening. And again, I'm extremely pleased with where the show is at right now, and it's so fun to do. And thank you so much, Georgi. And it's a blast having Ray on. And I think we're having some new nugget of info every time Ray is on. And so it's just, it's like a dream come true. And too bad society is ending soon. It will not be missed. That's all I have to say.
Okay, so let's jump to not that. Okay, so let's talk about hyperserotonemia causing insomnia, because that seemed to be that was another popular one on your Twitter.
Yeah. So I've known for, I mean, I've seen the studies for at least going back to at least 2014 when I was starting to get interested in serotonin antagonists. That if you go to the Wikipedia page, almost every single one that's there that has a page
For
says
serotonin?
that. Yeah, no, for serotonin antagonists, and there are like at least 20 different chemicals, right? Many of them are selective, or serotonin receptor one A, or like
This-
1C
this
or
one?
2B. Yeah. So if you go there and you start scrolling through a different serotonin antagonists, many of them have their own pages, right? And basically you'll see that they'll have studies showing that it improves deep restorative sleep in animals. And if you remember, I used to sell the serotonin antagonist called ritanserin. And one of the studies that people read the most and commented the most was the fact that it resolved chronic insomnia in human volunteers. But I thought it was just something unique to that drug. No, it turns out that actually serotonin is the cause of chronic insomnia, which really pains me to read it, because so many people are being prescribed SSRI drugs to actually improve their sleep. It's terrible. And you'll think, okay, how can serotonin cause insomnia if it's the chemical that induces hibernation in animals? Well, serotonin actually increases the production of cortisol. And ironically, if you actually, not ironically, but like as in a confirmation of the hypothesis, anti-cortisol drugs also treat insomnia and or promote sleep. There's some bodybuilders who are abusing the roids too much and basically getting they're getting insomnia and like heat waves, which is a very common sign of elevated estrogen and cortisol. And they're using the drug RU486, which is known as the abortion pill, but really is a cortisol blocker in its origin. They're using that to treat their insomnia.
So it wouldn't be a generative energy episode without mentioning RU486.
Yes, and G-Ball, right?
I don't know who that is, unfortunately.
Yeah. Never met him.
Okay, continue. I just interrupted to make that joke.
So apparently the link between, it has never been officially established, but the studies confirming the link between elevated serotonin and sleep problems and Alzheimer's and Parkinson and all of these things has been there for decades. I mean, there are studies when cyproheptadine was first synthesized in the late 50s and hit the market in the early 60s. Even back then, there were studies showing that it improves sleep in people, but they thought it was due to its antihistamine effect, and antihistamines are known to make people drowsy. However, drowsy and enabling deep sleep are not the same things. Some people are using other antihistamines that don't have an anti-serotonin effect, and they're saying, yes, it makes me drowsy, but it actually interferes with my sleep. I'm kind of like tired but wired state if you're using like a pure antihistamine, not Benadryl, but some of the newer ones that are known to be liver toxic. So basically, once again, the link between hyperserotonemia and autism has been confirmed in yet another study. I think this is at least 17 that I've seen since 2009. I think is the first one that actually said that. Of course, Ray said it a long time ago, long before that. But the first study that I saw officially that said there's a strong link between serotonin and autism. And I think that study made the link because like the vast majority of children born with autism or developing and later on are born to mothers who have been taking SSRI drugs during pregnancy or like before that.
Yeah, that we probably talked about that before. So serotonin is a pseudo hibernation hormone that causes kind of drowsiness, but it doesn't promote
it doesn't relax
sleep.
you.
Yeah.
So since it lowers the oxidative phosphorylation and you don't produce enough energy, the cells cannot relax. The state of relaxation is a state of high energy. Many people think that the state of relaxation is when you're exhausted, right?
Yeah.
And you want to go to bed. Well, try to overtire yourself and you will see that you will not be able to sleep. Why? Because your cortisol and serotonin will be through the roof and you'll be tossing and turning. Yes, you'll be drowsy. You'll be extremely tired the next day because you did not have the proper restorative sleep, but that's not the same thing as being sleep promoting. So tiring and sleep promoting are not the same thing.
Okay, and then how does serotonin interact with this hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, intestinal system? Like how does it increase cortisol, to your knowledge?
directly through ACTH and also CRH. And when it comes to the HPA axis, the doctor will say, okay, well, yes, cortisol is good. It's anti-inflammatory. It keeps blood sugar it prevents from dropping too low. That's true. But the other two components of the HPA axis, which is the ACTH and especially the CRH, are actually highly pro-inflammatory. If you go to the Wikipedia page of CRH, you'll see that it's now being implicated in a number of different neurological diseases, including multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. Just open that Wikipedia page and you will see.
I would if my computer worked. I don't know why it won't open this page. Okay, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, if you scroll down, I think there's like a special section on inflammation. So serotonin promotes the release of both of these. And basically, like, of course, you're getting the rolling. Yeah, there we go. CRH itself can actually heighten inflammation, a process being investigated in multiple sclerosis research. Somebody edited this page because 2 weeks ago there was also a section here on Parkinson, Alzheimer's disease, and I think even ALS. So somebody's changing. Well, it's normal. I mean, that's what Wikipedia is for, right? Anybody can edit it. But it is a highly inflammatory hormone similar to TSH. Remember, Pete keeps saying that most of the symptoms of hypothyroidism are actually due to the elevated TSH, right? Because it's a highly pro-inflammatory hormone. The same thing goes for CRH.
Have you seen this? Didn't Hans Selye? Selye pioneered the concept of biological stress in 1936, culminating in the identification of the corticotropin releasing factor, i.e. CRH, signaling pathway by Val's group in the last 2 decades. Anyways, yeah, this is the main hypothalamic hormone that is activating ACTH, activating the adrenals to release cortisol. Yeah.
And if you scroll up, I think it says in the title that it's tied to bad related functional bowel diseases. There you go. Mm-hmm. So people with autism have a known problem with digestion. It's basically, I think they're being diagnosed left and right with irritable bowel syndrome. Mm-hmm. Some of them IBS-C, the other ones with IBS-D. One of them is constipation, the other one's diarrhea. But both of these are known to be promoted by serotonin. And in fact, there right now, I think at least 2 clinical trials that are using TPH inhibitors, tryptophan hydroxylase inhibitors, to treat both types of irritable bowel syndrome. And doctors for a while kept arguing, it's like, well, serotonin cannot be involved in both because it's known to promote diarrhea. So the constipation one must be due to a deficiency of serotonin. And that's actually what triggered the development of, what was that drug? Zoltrex?
Zelnorm.
Zelnorm, yes. Mm-hmm. It is a 5-HT4 receptor agonist, and they thought it's going to cure the IBS-C, right? Not only it did not, but it caused several deaths, and I think a number of cases of inflammatory bowel syndrome, which is inflammatory bowel disease, such as Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, which are much more severe than the simple irritable bowel syndrome, which, by the way, is a precursor state. Many people, I think the official estimates are about 40% of people with IBS eventually go on to develop one of the 2 known inflammatory bowel disease conditions.
Yeah, this was from Ray's article, and it says Zelnorm was said to act like serotonin. Blah blah blah. What was the? I wonder if he has the list of diseases that Zelnorm caused.
The Wikipedia page does.
Okay.
If you go to Zelnorm, I think you'll list like basically the people died and the drug was voluntarily withdrawn after basically FDA. They didn't want to withdraw it, but FDA said, listen, in a very rare move, we will sue your butts if you don't withdraw it. And they did.
Oh, here it is. He says, oh my God.
There you go.
Ray's page is like really formatted weird. Where is it? Okay,
I just saw
a
list of side effects. There we go. Breast cancer. I just saw it. Just do control for breast cancer and it'll show up. There you go.
Okay. Zelnorm side effects: abdominal pain, chest pain, flushing, facial edema, hypertension, hypotension, angina, pectoris, syncope, arrhythmia, anxiety, etc., etc., breast cancer, attempted suicide, impaired concentration, increased appetite, sleep disorder, etc., etc. And I think he said, why was this drug approved? Because it was estimated to make something $1 billion.
Yeah. And I don't know how many people know, but in every big pharma company, there's actually a risk assessment team which reviews the data before it gets submitted to the FDA. And by the way, the company decides what data gets submitted to the FDA is part of the approval process. It's entirely up to the company. It's voluntary, right? Now, of course, if they withhold seriously, like if they had data that this thing kills people, and then later on FDA, catches a wind of that, it's probably going to be a problem, right? But in this case, what they did is basically they did not submit. Apparently, the company was aware that that's what the Serotonin can actually kill people.
Mm-hmm.
They did not submit this data. But more importantly, apparently there are risk assessment teams in every large big pharma company that looks at the trial data before the drug gets submitted for approval and basically calculates their estimate how long the drug will be on the market before a major class action lawsuit gets filed. And they simply go by the numbers. If the sales outweigh the expected lawsuits and like the settlements that need to be done, then they'll go ahead and submit the data for approval to the FDA without the data that shows that the drug is really bad. That's all that it comes down to. There's zero ethics in the drug development process, and possibly, and FDA just confirmed that there is zero ethics in the approval process as well. Did you see the news about the new Alzheimer drug that got approved this week?
A little bit, yeah.
The head of the FDA advisory committee resigned,
Mm-hmm.
and actually the advisory committee, which advises the FDA whether to approve a drug or not, advised against approving it.
Mm-hmm.
FDA still went and approved it because Biogen, the company that developed it, initially when they submitted the data, basically FDA said, no, this doesn't work. It's pretty clear it doesn't work, and actually makes the situation worse for some people. The Biogen went back and said, oh, let's exclude all of these pesky cases and let's reanalyze the data for only specific cases that we cherry picked. And guess what? Even for those, there was like a 1 or 2% improvement in cognitive function, which wasn't even clear it was statistically significant. Biogen said it is. FDA said, of course it is. And the advisory committee, the chairman and the vice chairman resigned yesterday. And they said, I don't want to be part of an agency. And I'm sure they're not exactly good apples either. But even if those corrupt people are resigning, at this point, just like Ray said, entire medicine at this point is a fad. And as soon as one fad basically gets exposed, they just like sweep it under the rug and they come up with a new one. It seems like the same thing is going on with politics.
Yeah.
We have the virus. Now the virus narrative is falling apart. Now cyber attacks, that will fall apart. And then like now the UFOs, I think they had really high hope for the UFOs, but that's not working. And then I'm afraid the only thing that remains is war. I mean, that's the only thing that will catch people's attention and keep it focused on whatever the government wants.
Well, it's funny that, to my understanding, the vaccines weren't developed. Well, they were developed by pharma, obviously, but under the instruction of the Pentagon, and those contracts and things are secret. So, like with this drug, people are upset and they're quitting, or whatever. But that's unlikely to happen with the vaccine because it's not the same deal.
Or they may be quitting the Pentagon, but you never hear about it. It's fully secret. And if they quit too often, they get suicided with 2 bullets to the back of their head, like Gary Webb, poor guy, or like fall into an elevator shaft onto some bullets. Yeah. I mean, there are many different ways people can commit suicide, and because they're depressed about who knows what. It's a depressing world.
Yeah. On that note, okay. Oh, you know what? Let's just finish this up a little bit. So what, say a person does suspect that they have high serotonin and they need to lower it, they're not getting any sleep. Like what do you, in your estimation, could be done?
The easiest dietary thing is salt, because the serotonin transporter protein is dependent on salt. And by the way, potassium. So salt is needed to get the serotonin transporter to bind serotonin and basically drive it to the platelets, right? Which then carry it to the lungs for deactivation. But so once it binds serotonin, it's the serotonin transporter itself is not deactivated, but it's out of commission. It needs to get rid of serotonin, right? And once inside of the cell, apparently potassium is what's needed for that break of the bond to occur, and then re-export the serotonin transporter so that it can bind more serotonin and keep deactivating it. If you go to the Wikipedia page for serotonin transporter, it's a really good description. Basically, so which means your alkaline minerals, so maybe like orange juice, which has a lot of potassium, with some baking soda will be a great way to do it if you don't want to take the serotonin drugs. Other things, basically charcoal, just keeping digestion going and preventing endotoxin from building up. What else? I mean, there are over-the-counter drugs like famotidine, which is an anti-acid drug. Seems to be a pretty potent serotonin either blocker or inhibitor of its synthesis. Cyproheptadine's out there, but it's not available unless you have a prescription. Benadryl is not a bad one. Just make sure you don't use more than 100 milligrams, because after that it starts to act like an SSRI drug, and you don't want to basically get to that state. Just do a control for. Oh, you're searching.
Okay, what did you want me to see on here?
The Wikipedia page. If you search for potassium, it should show that section. There we go.
Serotonin reuptake transporters are dependent on both the concentration of potassium ion in the cytoplasm and the concentration of sodium and chloride ions in the extracellular fluid in order to function properly. The serotonin transporters requires the membrane potential created by the sodium potassium adenosine triphosphatase.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of preoccupied.
Just scroll for the second paragraph. That describes real well. There you go.
Okay. The serotonin transporter first binds to a sodium ion followed by the serotonin and then a chloride ion. Thus, it's allowed, thanks to the membrane potential, to flip inside the cell, freeing all elements previously bound. Right after the release of the serotonin in the cytoplasm, a potassium ion binds to the transporter, which is now able to flip back out, returning to its active state. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you need both, right? Mm-hmm. So you need sodium in order for you to bind serotonin and get inside the cell and release it there. But if you don't have sufficient potassium, then the serotonin transporter will stay inside the cell and basically will be you'll probably achieve much less than if the serotonin transporter was able to get out and continue doing its work.
I was kind of preoccupied. Did you mention aspirin as a anti-serotonin substance?
Yes, it's known that aspirin decreases serotonin in whole blood, and basically that's one reason why it's known that aspirin has an antidepressive effect. Mainstream medicine is trying to convince people that it's all entirely due to its COX inhibiting mechanism. It's really not true. I think the majority of the aspirin's antidepressant effect stems from two things. One, decrease in extracellular serotonin. Two, stimulation of oxidative phosphorylation. ATP is known to have an antidepressant effect. In fact, there were studies as part of not MKUltra, but it was another project by the Pentagon, which looked at how they can treat PTSD in soldiers. Mm-hmm. And it was only one study, but apparently ATP infusions were really had very, very high potential because they were able to basically resolve the PTSD within a few hours. It's almost like the ketamine, the fast-acting antidepressant, or allopregnanolone, which just got approved as a fast-acting antidepressant. The problem with the ATP infusion was that it was very short-lived. As soon as you stop the infusions, within a few hours, the person will relapse back into their PTSD/depressive state, which tells you that it's really ATP deficiency that's driving it. Which means that one of the mechanisms through which aspirin helps is probably because it stimulates mitochondrial function.
Great stuff. Okay, 141 people watching right now. Guys, give us a favor, like the episode. Sincerely helps with the show. I think, like we talked about incessantly, these first episodes, I think we are suppressed in the search algorithm because of the topics we talk about. So really appreciate that. Okay, let's just do a small break, and maybe Georgi will do like 2 or so more articles, and then maybe chit chat, and then call it a night.
Sure.
So let's go through here. You can follow me on Instagram, the Danny Roddy weblog, and that has like food ideas. People are always asking about these things, so you might get an idea there.
Let me give you a good food idea.
Yeah, okay.
So Ray keeps saying like he likes animal protein, but he doesn't like the meats because of the very high phosphate content and low calcium, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at calcium, if you look at milk, the calcium to phosphorus ratio is about 1.5 to 1. Mm-hmm. At least it's above 1. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Ray is shooting for. Mm-hmm. If you're eating any kind of a food, you should have a calcium to phosphorus ratio of higher than 1. Mm-hmm. So I have some calcium carbonate, and I thought, why not add some calcium carbonate to ground beef and basically raise that ratio artificially? Yeah. So the question is, would it cook well? Would it become something that you don't want to be eating chalk, right? It's one thing to be taking this as a pill and chugging it and swallowing it and not really feeling it, right? Mm-hmm. It's completely different to be chewing on chalk.
Yeah.
So we basically today we made burgers where each burger had about 1 gram of calcium in it.
Wow.
And they weren't that big. I mean, basically like regular burgers that you would use in a bun for hamburger. I could not feel or see the calcium in it, But it was there because after I had 2 burgers, immediately started sweating and like it started getting these deep breathing effects. You know that carbon dioxide is high and metabolism is higher. But so there's the other thing. But there's another factor. Meat is also high in the inflammatory amino acids, tryptophan, cysteine, and methionine. So how much of those are there, and what can you do to oppose those? Well, there's about 5 grams of total of these 3 amino acids, 5 grams per pound, which is about half a kilo per pound of ground beef. So usually you need about, if you're going to be opposing them with gelatin, which was my idea that I thought try to do that, you need about a ratio of 2 to 1. So which means you need about 10 grams of gelatin per pound of ground beef in order to oppose that. So we made another version of the burger with the calcium and with the gelatin. So we added about 10 grams of gelatin. And believe it or not, the burgers got better. They became juicier. So there's something in the gelatin that actually makes it really, really tasty. That regular meat just doesn't do it that well for me. The gelatin really changed it. Not only became more anti-inflammatory, but actually the taste drastically improved as well. So try that. So basically 5 grams of inflammatory amino acids per pound of ground beef, or let's say per pound of meat, right? If it's pure meat. So you need at least 10 grams of gelatin to actually oppose that. And then I've tried up to a gram of calcium carbonate, gram of calcium from calcium carbonate per burger. And I couldn't detect the chalk. So if you want to try that recipe, please do and let me know if you like it, because I think this is like I don't know, I might open a restaurant in Bulgaria and try it out.
I was going to make the joke. I think this burger should be named Georgi's Bulgarian Bioenergetic Burger.
Hidut nibbles or something.
Okay. That's also a very good name. Yeah, man, that's crazy. Yeah, I was just talking to somebody probably like 3 hours ago, and she was like, milk and cheese are a total no-go for me, even like Parmesan or Reggiano. And there was like a time when I got into raised stuff that I ate eggshells pretty regularly, like powdered eggshells, and it really helped everything. And so I would never poo-poo on the calcium supplementation, because I think it's probably extremely useful, especially for somebody in like a bad state, which I was. And
it works also really good in stews and soups. That's actually where I prefer it there as the most.
What brand are you using? Is it the Now calcium carbonate?
No, it's something else. I'll send you it's from Amazon, but basically it's like 2 capsules have about 500 milligrams of elemental calcium. So we calculated. So this means 4 capsules per burger. And I thought it's a lot, but it just disappeared. It's like it mixed perfectly well. And it kind of cuts a little bit of the acidity, because meat is acidic. Even when you eat it, you feel a little bit of, so of course the carbonate is going to oppose some of that. I don't know. I'm pretty psyched. It tasted really good. And if you only use the meat, you can also add some eggs. So if you want to make burgers, they actually in Europe, when they make the burgers, here in the States, they usually like will cook the burger separate, and they may put an egg on top of it, right? Easy, what is it called? Easy sides up.
Yeah.
Yeah, sunny side up.
Yeah.
In Europe, they actually mix the raw eggs with the ground beef and mix it all together and then cook the burger. So you can try that as well. I think it will also help if you put some extra calcium carbonate. It'll prevent the chalkiness from forming. So if you want to put more than 1 gram of calcium per burger, you can probably get away with more if you add some raw eggs to the ground beef and mash it all up until it's well mixed.
I love it. This is the first time I think we've received a recipe from you. So this is excellent.
I experiment all the time. To the point where my wife has banned me from the kitchen, so I have to use the one here in the office, but it's okay.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks for that, Georgi. Okay, so let's, I forget, what did I said Instagram. I said follow Georgi on Twitter, at Hidut. Follow me on Twitter, at Danny Roddy. But to really follow everything that's going on, subscribe to t.me/Danny Roddy. I do coaching. We already talked about that. We already talked about Idealabs. We'll talk about it one last time before we get out of here. And okay, what's the time? 1:10. Okay, Georgi, what other articles?
Let's see. Can you show me the list again?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I mentioned one other thing. Was it cortisol, obesity, diabetes, and things?
Oh yeah, it's the cortisol causes fatty liver.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's news. I actually thought I had posted this in the past, but I looked through the blog, I couldn't find it.
Mm-hmm.
I looked through the forum, I couldn't find it, and I thought like, wow, I mean, it's really worth posting there. Now, the reason I like this study is because even the authors themselves were surprised and said all other studies that dealt with cortisol usually dealt with cortisol as an exogenously administered hormone.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we know that people who have autoimmune conditions, they should not be taking cortisol for too long because it destroys their bones, destroys their muscles, gives them psychosis, depression, etc., etc. But they said like we've never actually looked at what happens if the endogenous levels of cortisol are slightly higher.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, I mean, basically, even without having a Cushing syndrome, basically even slightly elevated levels of cortisol chronically are sufficient to trigger drastic overproduction of triglycerides and have them get stored in the liver, which is the other thing. Liver would normally export those for storage into the fatty tissue. And, you know, I'm not going to let cortisol off the hook. It actually contributes to that as well. But it really directly caused non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in this case without actually cortisol levels being above what's considered the normal range on most medical tests. So if cortisol can cause fatty liver, and actually they said that they think this process is implicated in many other metabolic conditions to which the NAFLD is the precursor, such as obesity, insulin resistance, diabetes, the non-insulin dependent one, and probably eventually even the insulin dependent one, because if the non-insulin dependent one is not well controlled, eventually your doctor will put you on injectable insulin, even if your pancreas is still working.
So what's happening here? The cortisol is lipolytic, and then the free fatty acids have to be taken care of by the liver, and then a lot of those are being converted into triglycerides or attached with
but also cortisol activates the enzyme fatty acid synthase.
Mm-hmm.
So if whatever you're eating from the food, especially the carbs, whatever gets metabolized through the Krebs cycle, basically instead of going through the electron transport chain and getting converted to carbon dioxide and water, cortisol will say, no, synthesize more fat. So if more fat is synthesized, something needs to happen to that fat. And basically the beta oxidation can only handle so much. And the rest gets converted to triglycerides, and a majority of those should get exported and stored into the peripheral fatty tissue. Cortisol prevents that process. So it increases the synthesis of fat and also makes the liver store most of that fat in the form of triglycerides inside of itself. So you're getting basically fatty liver directly.
And then that process, if we were just eating saturated fat, wouldn't be too bad. But with the accumulation of injury via the PUFA and other things, that creates the transitions from the non-alcoholic fatty liver to NASH. What is it?
Yes, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, and then eventually cirrhosis, and eventually liver cancer. They're really like the steps on the scale from each other. Now, the key thing here is that, remember, saturated fat actually has an anti-cortisol effect. There's an old article by Pete, and I've been able to confirm this through the studies, which said that I think somebody he may have anticipated a question, saying like, well, if oxidizing fat is bad for you, like then how is saturated fat any different aside from the fact that it doesn't have the inflammatory effect? And I think Pete in that article said that basically all saturated fats have an anti-cortisol effect by lowering the synthesis of ACTH, and some of them are actually acting on the brain's cannabinoid system, and basically are inhibiting the release of CRH as well. PUFA does not have this effect. And in fact, if you remember those studies I posted on the forum, it can increase the synthesis of cortisol even without ACTH, which suggests that PUFA has some kind of a hormonal effect and is capable of acting on the adrenals directly to increase the synthesis of cortisol. Saturated fats have the exact opposite effect, which is why if you eat mostly saturated fat, or if your fatty tissue is composed mostly of saturated fat, the effects of stress are self-limiting. In other words, there will be lipolysis, but the lipolysis with saturated fat will actually put an end to the stress response. While with PUFA, it actually has an amplifying effect, and unless something breaks that cycle, it forms a vicious cycle immediately, right? Because if PUFA activates the synthesis of cortisol, cortisol is going to increase adrenaline, adrenaline will create more lipolysis, more PUFA, more cortisol, more etc., etc. It's saturated fat that puts a break on that cycle, and if you don't have that, then the only other thing you can do is basically either take something that lowers adrenaline, lowers lipolysis, such as niacinamide, or blocks the effects of cortisol.
Amazing. Okay, let's do, what time is it? 1:15. Okay, I think we one or two more articles would be good. What do you want to do kind of different? The working too hard, too long can kill you?
I mean, I think at this point, it's no secret. But
Or-
it's good because I think it's coming from the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
They're for the first time admitting that if you work for your master, Dr. Fauci or Bill Gates, it's not good for you and it can lead to premature death. And by the way, what they define as working hard was anything longer than 55 hours. Guess what? Most Americans are working probably twice that, or okay, even if it's not twice that, but most people that are in the IT business that I know, they're routinely putting in 70 and 80 or even more hours a week, and that's considered normal. In fact, I don't know of any professional, in other words, like working in a more or less niche market, in other words, a lawyer, a doctor, an IT specialist, that doesn't work at least 60 plus 70 plus hours a week. If you do anything less than that, you're either rich and you don't care, or you're slacking, or I don't know, you're a drug addict or something, but or you found something that can support you without you killing yourself through work. Very few of us are that fortunate.
Love this quote. Giving maximum meaning to our lives should be one of the basic things we demand of our work. And so, like,
ironically, Steve Jobs said something similar during the infamous Stanford address that he gave in 2005. He basically said that because the majority of your life in this world will compose of work, the only way to live meaningful lives is if we do great work. And that was actually his message at during the Stanford desk was precisely the same. He said, if you know, because at the time he thought he had beaten cancer, but then the cancer returned. But his message was, if you're told by a doctor you'll die tomorrow, and then think of whether what you're doing right now actually has any meaning, or whether it will give you a cause for regret. If it gives you a cause for regret, then you should not be doing it anymore. And never is too soon for you to quit and start searching for something else. So the working too hard, unless it's something that you really enjoy and you're kind of feeling like you're giving yourself entirely to it and you're helping the world, and it's got this incredible meaning, like transcendence that basically goes way beyond money, and just sense of fulfillment, then I don't think that working more than 55 hours is something that you should keep doing, because I thought that, when I was still young and healthy, that, I can last in this rat race forever. But what was that book, Mr. Glass, from
Shyamalan?
Yeah.
What's the relationship?
You mentioned in one quote that many of us realized too late that we're like Mr. Glass from that novel. That we're way more fragile than we think.
That movie's unbreakable. I used to love that movie. That's odd you referenced it. So this quote by Abraham Maslow: the only happy people I know are the ones who are working well at something they consider important. And so I realized the irony that this is going to get more and more difficult, and it's already difficult at the moment, especially as inflation goes high and people are probably going to be begging for jobs, and so it could get really, really bad. And so, yeah, man.
All I can do is quote Mike Tyson: "You get old too soon and smart too late."
Yeah. Well, I mean, I apologize if people have heard this story before, but I lived I've said it 100,000 times, but in San Francisco, and it was obvious that a lot of people that were making hundreds of thousands of dollars were so deeply unhappy.
Miserable. Miserable. They're not just unhappy. They're like on drugs all the time.
Yeah. And of course, if you offered my salary to them, they'd laugh in your face, but I was determined not to be me, because that just seemed like the life is flying by. I'll be 36 next month. Like, this is just this is crazy, and so it's just life goes by too fast, I think, to be doing something that you absolutely can't stand and hate.
Wait until you have children. You probably will not tolerate more than like a call a day with any of your clients. Anything else, you'll be able to pull your hair out.
Jokes on you, because I don't think I'm going to have
Okay.
I'm just going to live vicariously through you.
That's fine, man. It's all one organism anyways. Like the separateness of bodies and whatnot is illusion.
Speaking of, okay, so what's the time here? Okay, 1:20. Do you want to talk about one more, then we can chit chat and then get out of here?
Sure.
Okay, so what is your preference?
Let's see. Do you want to talk about vitamin D?
Yeah, I'd love to. Love to do that.
Actually, pretty good study. It's actually said that it's truly the high PTH that's driving bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they're also making the connection. So the study said, I think the title was something along the lines of calcium homeostasis.
Mm-hmm.
But then the authors themselves, if you look at the popular press article and the study inside, they were surprised. They said, we never thought that something as simple as calcium homeostasis, which we know has wide-ranging effects for a lot of other diseases, mostly metabolic ones. Of course, they don't treat bipolar disorder as a metabolic disease. When they never thought it will basically be discovered as a major contributing factor. But it was, and I think for every titer of increasing PTH, the condition of the bipolar people that became that much worse. And I think at the highest titer, they basically had to be hospitalized. And also the recovery from bipolar disorder, I think it mimicked almost perfectly the droppage of their parathyroid hormone. There you go. Number of hospitalizations in parapsychiatrists was significantly associated with PTH levels. PTH levels highly correlated with level of emotional and physical abuse and neglect.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. And not so much vitamin D, but then they start talking about like how raising vitamin D and calcium lowers PTH, and basically that may be why so many of those epidemiological studies are finding that higher levels of vitamin D correlate with better mental health, and they're saying, bingo, we just found the why. Maybe it's not so much the vitamin D, which actually I think it is. Vitamin D also contributes because blocks cortisol, right? Cortisol is implicated in bipolar disorder, but PTH is highly inflammatory, raises serotonin, and serotonin is known at this point among people of the know who are not afraid of losing their jobs, that basically it drives both the manic and the depressive phase of bipolar disorder. Why? Because serotonin is depressive, so serotonin directly drives the depression, but it also raises cortisol, and cortisol drives the manic phase. So if you give anti-serotonin drugs, you can actually cure bipolar disorder. Cortisol blockers have been used to treat bipolar disorder, but it was found that they only help the manic phase. They didn't completely arrest it.
Yeah, I was trying to look for the PTH being related to general metabolic syndrome. So, like that hormone has so many negative effects, promoting lipolysis, promoting nitric oxide, probably a bunch of other stuff that I don't know, but just keeping it low can seriously improve the quality of life. So good, our buddy cholecalciferol, that can really be
the
useful.
Inactive one,
yeah,
the highly inactive one.
Very important, and of course, getting enough calcium would work in the same direction in vitamin K and things like that. What was I going to say here? Okay,
scroll down a little bit because they themselves say vitamin D.
Here,
further down. No, it says vitamin D is up. Is a valid treatment for this condition. Further up.
Okay.
Further up. There we go.
Identify associate. Although previous studies have
no, the one in red.
Oh, my bad.
Above it.
I keep forgetting some people only listen to audio on here. The importance of routinely assessing PTH, vitamin D, and calcium levels in patients with what's BD?
Bipolar disorder
as a marker of clinical severity, and may point to vitamin D as a valid add-on treatment for these patients. What are you thinking if somebody goes and they're motivated and they get their parathyroid hormone checked? What are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean if it comes back high?
Yeah. Well, do you have any?
I think if it's in the upper 50th percentile, it's already a cause for worry. And if it's in the upper 25th percentile, then I would start seriously considering upping calcium intake, or at the very least taking vitamin D, despite what our enemies say about calcitriol and
I wouldn't say enemies. Well, I was trying to find
adversaries. Let's call them adversaries.
I was going to say there's a paper, I can't find it right now. I could dig in my Evernote, but they said the upper normal range was related to hardening of the arteries, I think it was. And so I wanted to bounce this off you, but like, what do you think about just keeping that number as low as humanly possible? Like if the range is 14 to 65, it's probably good to keep it at 14, because that means you're not breaking down your skeleton for calcium.
It's not increasing prolactin, because if PTH rises, then prolactin also increases because it's a sign of calcium deficiency. So basically, whatever PTH, so whatever calcium you're not taking from the diet, this signal PTH raising prolactin, you're going to get it from your bones. So I haven't seen any studies on what happens if your PTH is too low. The ones that I've seen, they did not find any negative long-term negative effects. Now, there are people with low PTH but that's like basically is a pathology. The only case where I know that this is the case and a PTH, low PTH is bad is people with cancer because they're producing PTH-RP, parathyroid hormone related peptide, and that one drastically raises their serum calcium, and the serum calcium shoots. I think the upper limit is 10.1, the normal one. But in people with cancer-related hypercalcemia, serum calcium can reach 13 to 14 units. And at that point, that elevated serum calcium drastically suppresses PTH to almost undetectable levels. So that's the only time that I think you need to be worried about your PTH being too low. In every other case, basically, like if you test your PTH and it's in the normal range, you'll probably not be hurting yourself if you lower it further.
Yeah, and just to beat a dead horse, calcium outflow from the bone that occurs to prevent decrease of blood calcium in the calcium deficiency caused by PTH, with the consequent calcium overflow into soft tissue and the intracellular compartment. So when you don't get enough vitamin D, cholecalciferol, when you don't get enough calcium, that increases the parathyroid hormone, that liberates calcium from blood, and then that's the calcium that's going into the soft tissue, turning on, making cells hyperactive, and turning on nitric oxide and things like that. And so eating calcium or taking vitamin D does not calcify you. It does the exact opposite by suppressing parathyroid hormone.
Right. And if you want to, another thing that prevents a soft tissue calcification actually can reverse it is vitamin K.
And just to fully address this, I don't think there doesn't like, okay, I just don't even want to bring it up. Okay. That is, that's pretty good.
It is bothering you too. I thought it's only me.
Well, I just want to be complete, I think when we have these shows, sometimes somebody will say, oh, well, you didn't talk about this. And as you know, we could cover 10 different aspects of this, but we would just be saying the same thing over and over because this isn't the first time vitamin D and parathyroid hormone have come up in 59 shows. Do you know what I mean? And so yeah. My tendency is always to try to address those things that I suspect people might ask, but I think it gets a little bit belabored. And so just have to move on at some point. Okay, so why don't you give us one more update about Idealabs, even if it's the same stuff you said earlier. Then we're
continuing with the studies, but now we have some new chemicals that we're going to test. We're synthesizing some new serotonin antagonists. One of them is sinanserin, of COVID-19 infamy. If you go to the sinanserin webpage, you will see that the Chinese are using that, and actually they're the biggest producer of it. I think it's banned from export. I tried to get some from China, and it's available there. It's non-prescription drug. But the labs that I contacted refused to export it to the United States, and it's known to actually block the COVID, the virus from infecting the cell. And if you already have that, it's also known to stop it in its tracks. Any other anti-serotonin agent will probably have similar effects, but sinanserin had a unique anti-SARS-CoV-2 effect. If you go to the Wikipedia page, it says it right there. So sinanserin is one thing we're synthesizing. We're going to test it on some viral conditions. We'll see if we can get our hands on on SARS-CoV-2.
I'm retarded. How do you spell it?
Sinanserin, C-I, C-I, not S-I.
Oh.
C-I-N-A-N-S-E, E-R, yeah, exactly. And if you look, scroll down, you'll see that there we go. It says the molecule. Scroll up a little more. The molecule is an inhibitor of the 3C-like protease of SARS coronavirus. And it's known, I've already contacted some people in China. They're using it there to treat coronavirus cases. I wonder why we haven't heard about this on any news channels.
Have you not heard that we have a life-saving vaccine out?
Multiple ones, right? The ones that change your very nature, Danny. Why would you use some stupid? Actually, by the way, this drug is a derivative of Benadryl. It's structurally similar. So they're like, well, why would you use some stupid antihistamine developed in the 60s when you get the latest and greatest, which really means the most aggressive treatment? I knew some people that had cancer, and the ones that got the latest and greatest treatments didn't do so well.
Well, we've said it 1,000 times, but any drug that comes out will take about 30 to 50 years to figure out all.
20 years before you kind of get an idea of the long-term effects. 30 years before you know like what the age groups you should even be prescribed for. And I think about 40 to 50 years before you kind of get an idea of like the dosage, and the dose dependent effect, if any, what conditions, what people with certain conditions may not be or should not be given this drug, stuff like that. So it takes decades. Anything less than that, like if somebody tells you that they know so much about a drug before it actually hits the general market, the general population, they're either selling that drug or they're trying to sell it on something else.
What was that emergency CDC thing that happened? Maybe it's about the cardiomyositis that happened to the young people.
Oh yeah, the latest thing is basically the pericarditis. It's inflammation of the lining of the heart. And they're saying that basically, of course, they immediately had two experts saying, "Well, there's no evidence this is related to the vaccine." Then why is the CDC saying it's related to the vaccine, and why are they investigating it? Actually, CDC already said it's related to the vaccine, but they're saying the incidence is very low.
Yeah, this was it. CDC to hold emergency meeting after hundreds suffer heart disease inflammation following COVID vaccines. And this is what was the official date? Like that this is so early, this is just like a month or two from this insanity. Like think about what's going to happen in a year or 2 years, and what is the bullshit nonsense that they're going to cover story?
I'm afraid that the thing they're ascribing to Montagnier, which Pete said it's fake, basically, that he said within 2 years, most of these people will be dead, and there's no hope for them. And Pete said, no, they're just ascribing this to him because, they want to paint him as a crazy person. I hope that we didn't trigger that living reality among us to basically like, to I don't know, what's the expression when you say something and then it happens?
Oh, I can't think of it.
I mean, the way things are going, it looks like jinx. Is it jinx or not?
No. I don't know. Help us out in the chat here, guys. Keep going.
Well, basically, I hope that we didn't awaken the devil by saying this, because I mean, if you look at the virus system, there's another article on Zero Hedge about the virus system, and basically the CDC changed the requirements for reporting to the virus. And basically now it's allowing reports to go into the virus only.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, is that what you think?
Self-fulfilling prophecy, yeah, I guess.
Thanks, AJ.
And basically the CDC now changed the requirements for reporting to the virus that artificially lowers the number of reportable serious adverse events related to the vaccine. In addition, there's in the Zero Hedge article, which we should be able to find, I think it's like from either yesterday or the day before, back in the 90s, CDC commissioned Harvard to do a study on the virus system, and Harvard found that only 1% of the actual true serious adverse event rate gets reported into the virus system. So currently there are over 4,000 reports of serious adverse effects. If that's 1%, then multiply by 100, and you're going to get like the true number of serious adverse events related to the vaccine. And by serious adverse events, I do mean serious adverse events. Virus would not accept the report that you had like a fever that lasted 3 days.
Is this
let me see.
Trust is being
no. Scroll. Go back to Google and type Zero Hedge. When you say site, you don't have to type the HTTPS. Actually.
Okay. Well, it didn't seem like it didn't seem like it was scraping Zero Hedge when I was.
So only zerohedge.com without the dot. Yes. Harvard virus, VAERS. Without vaccine, just virus. Let's see if this comes up.
Today.
It's strange.
Zerohedge.com. Maybe we did need the www. Nope.
Okay. But anyways, basically the article was that it's just starting. Oh, you know what? It was on globalresearch.ca.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let's search that. And
this is good content.
And just do Harvard virus in Google and see if it comes up. It should. No. These are ads by Google.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going. I'll find it.
Let me see.
There's Harvard site. Oh, can we trust America's COVID-19 vaccine injury statistics?
I guess. Let me see. Virus.
So while we're on the topic, somebody asked, are you familiar with, I'm going to butcher this, Sumarin or something as a treatment for vaccine injury? Do you know anything about this?
Suramin.
Suramin, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's used for treating sleeping disease, like sleeping sickness disease. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he has an anti-serotonin effect because there's studies, both at this point, both human and animal studies, as using suramin as treatment for autism. And autism is mostly serotonin-driven disease, and suramin helps. My guess is that the same mechanism is implicated in COVID-19.
I don't know why this is formatting so weird. Anyways, yeah, I mean, I don't believe in anything these days. What they're saying, the percentage of people vaccinated or unvaccinated, I question all this stuff.
Well, I question everything that comes out of at this point of, like, as they say, the evil empire does not give free publicity to the truth.
Yeah.
So,
It's okay. We can touch on it.
Anyways,
next
the
week.
message is only 1% of the actual virus events get reported to the CDC system, and that was an estimate by Harvard. And actually, Harvard received a $2 million grant from CDC to develop a new system that was much more efficient, and Harvard did. And it was really funny because they had some interviews with the people who were responsible for developing the system at Harvard. They said, as soon as we contacted the CDC and said the system is ready, all the people that were our contact people disappeared. They stopped picking up the phone. Some of them immediately retired. Others changed titles, and still others claim that we've never met and that we've never interacted, and they don't know what this is all about. So Harvard developed that system, but CDC refused to put it in place. That was back in 1995.
That's insane. Okay, so wrapping up here, I like to always end on things you can do. You know, we're always talking about how we think the future is going to be bleak. I just want to say that, I mean, this might sound so obvious, but if you type in like prepper 15 items, there's a bunch of videos like this one, 15 items every prepper should hoard for shit hits the fan. And honestly, like videos like this go over things you probably didn't expect, like, or you just didn't remember, you know. And so for what it's worth, I spend a lot of my free time like going over through videos like this and just seeing, oh my god, and going through things like this and seeing if anything the person mentions might be useful. If the power goes out for an extended period of time, if the sewer stuff stops working for a period of time. And I think this will not surprise anybody that listens to the show, but I just think doing stuff like that actually is part of the, it's like it can be a therapeutic thing for if you do believe there's going to be impending doom down the line.
I found the article.
Oh, okay. What was it?
It's I don't know why it's not coming up on the search. Maybe it's too new and it's not being indexed by Google, or more likely Google is simply suppressing it.
Very
I'll send
possible.
you over the chat.
Okay. On Skype?
But it was from Global Research, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, here we go. This is going to open up in Firefox. There we go. There we go. Okay, we're good. Okay, vaccine casualties. Is the CDC hiding the real numbers? This stuff is so... How I have this set up is the screen is ridiculously small.
If you just do Control for Harvard, oh, there we go. It's in the third paragraph. In 2010, Harvard Medical School. There we go.
Can you even see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm reading it off of your screen.
It's like cut off. In 2010, Harvard Medical School was granted $1 million in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to investigate VAERS to see how efficient it is to create a new automated monitoring system. They analyzed data by creating an automated system within their own Harvard medical system. Their report titled Electronic Support for Public Health, Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System found that fewer than 1% of vaccine adverse events are reported to VAERS. That's insane.
And then look straight up. 4,201 VAERS. I'm sorry, 227,805 VAERS reports there. Now multiply this by 100. Because it's less than 1%, right? Let's assume it's 1%.
805.
It's 2.2 million at this point. There's serious adverse events.
Yeah. I bet they just did.
Just in the U.S. Just in the U.S.
I bet they had good intentions though, and they didn't know that.
Of course not, right? Look at the deaths. 4,201 deaths. Multiply this by 100.
I'm
42,000 deaths.
yeah,
That's getting close to a flu season mortality rate, and we're just starting.
yeah, that's the thing. And we haven't even received our boosters yet, you know. So
Did you? How dare you not care about the people right next to you, Danny? You're a grandpa killer.
okay, yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so to get back on the prepper stuff. So, anyways, I spend a lot of time. I'm not saying you should, but I spend a lot of time watching things like this from people like that. And yeah, I don't know, Georgie. What's new in your life? What I to be honest with you, I feel like this is the calm before the storm now. And you know, I could be completely wrong, but I do feel like maybe you mentioned it in the start of the conversation that it feels like we're tightening down on a ratchet or something, and especially that cyber polygon stuff happening next month really makes me worried, you know, about what's going to happen.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I expect further lockdowns because the Great Reset cannot really be implemented until pretty much all the small businesses and medium-sized businesses are gone. And basically the big conglomerates take over fully. For as long as there's small independent businesses, medium independent businesses, it's hard to go against them because there's a sufficient number of them that basically they can trigger like not so much revolts, but independence movements that can lead to secession, right? Or like a civil war or things like that. Until the ability of the public, or at least the small, tightly knit communities, their ability to finance themselves is fully destroyed, I don't think the system will be able to implement the Great Reset fully. So I expect more lockdowns. It doesn't have to be a pandemic related. They can say if we're under cyber attack and there are food shortages, the mayor or like the governor can actually mandate lockdown even without public emergency. I mean, they'll say there are marauding gangs on the streets. So for your safety, just like during a hurricane, you need to stay in your house, right? And then, of course, who defines? I mean, how do you know that these marauding gangs are actually really marauding gangs or paid actors, right? If you're not able to get out, and if most of them are armed, probably you're not going to be confronting them, right? So unlike a virus where you can actually, independent researchers can actually investigate and confirm, yes, they're being censored all the time, right? But it's still, you can actually do some independent work with a virus. How would you do independent work with a gang? It's just not something that most people will do, right? So I think more lockdowns may be coming. So if you don't have it yet, make sure you have some. My prepping is a little bit of gold, guns, of course, if you're allowed to have them, right? Medicines, and canned food. That's probably the minimum that you will need to survive. But if it gets to that point, then who knows? I mean, like if you have guns and you have food and things like that, and if you stay in the city, it's probably not going to be very survivable. So I think it actually, all of these things, all the prepping also presupposes that you also should be changing location as well to places that are not, not likely to collapse.
Yeah, I know this is easier said than done, but that a lot of those people, that have been prepping for 20 years, all of them say being in the city is about the worst place you could possibly be if stuff does go down. And so, but there was a channel called City Prepping, and that was his whole orientation. It was trying to show people who live in cities what they could do, and he had a lot of tips for that.
Well, go underground, like go into the canal system or something.
I think it was just like the same type of stuff, like
Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Exactly. Okay. On that note, so we will be back next week. I think we'll take calls, kind of spice up the show, so it's not the same old. And then the week after will be Ray again. I need to email him. I haven't emailed him yet. And that's it. Georgie, parting words.
I don't know what to say. I mean, just to survive, stay sane, and have fun as much as you can, because we don't know how long this is going to last.
Yeah.
Even though it does look like the empire got maybe a little bit spooked by Russia and China and whatnot. I mean, the war rhetoric was really high, let's say 2 months ago. Now seems to be a little bit, relaxed, but maybe because they're planning something else. But at least enjoy the summer, whatever. Try to absorb as much sunshine as you can if you don't like taking vitamin D and calcium, because we'll most certainly need it in the fall.
Yeah, my suggestion would be to I mean, hopefully I'm completely wrong, but I maybe this time being the calm before the storm, and it's a time maybe you could look back at in the future and think, man, I wish I would have done more. And so I think that's my orientation. I'm trying to do as much as humanly possible and guessing for scenarios that I might never happen, but makes me feel a little bit better knowing that I'm preparing for them. So with that, we'll get out of here. Thank you guys so much. We have an amazing audience, 151 people. Guys, give us a like. Sincerely appreciate that. It really helps the show. And it's nice to know which episodes you guys enjoy and which you guys do not. And do it for
I think Google is using the likes to basically decide which episodes to ban, to shadow ban. It's like these episodes are really liked, which means they're spreading a lot of this information.
Oh, you know what? Let me read we got some stickers, I think. So let me bring up the screen here, make it smaller. Appreciate it, guys. Any stickers, that does support. Oh, YouTube is showing me one sticker. That's amazing. I know we got more than that. I guess we'll just have to read them next time. This is ridiculous. This is such a stupid system. And I see Lucas's
corrupt, man. Corrupt.
Boost your biology for $10 Australian. Thank you so much, Lucas. Also, I had an interview with Lucas recently that was awesome. And I'm not sure it'll probably be on his YouTube page, but guys, to anybody that donated, I'll have to read your name and the next stream because I don't know why it's not showing me. Okay, with that, guys, thank you so much. Have an amazing week. Next week, we'll be back with Georgi Dinkov. Thank you so much, Georgi, for making these podcasts, live streams so fun to do. It's really a joy, and stay safe, everyone. We'll talk to you guys next week. Take care. Peace out.